let's stick with the doctor for a second. I know you said the doctor was brought in to give Kiki lidocaine to make sure he did not pass out. Why were they interrogating him to begin with?
Kiki was picked up because he had found out that Caro Quintero was receiving a lot of cocaine at a ranch in Veracruz, Mexico. What Kiki did not know is that that ranch was being used by our CIA to train Contras. The CIA was working with the cartels not only to get their assistance in transporting weapons south to the Contras. They were also getting drugs from the cartels, which they were bringing into the United States to support the Contras war in Nicaragua. Now, let me explain to you what was going on back then. Back at that juncture, back in 1978-79, the Daniel Ortega Communist Organization overthrew the Somoza government in Nicaragua. The CIA and our DIA military people went to Congress and requested funding to support the Contras war against the communist Daniel Ortega regime. We had just come out of Vietnam, Sean, and Congress says, no, we're not going to get involved in another war in South America. No, we're not going to fund the war in Nicaragua. So what does the CIA do? They decide they're going to fund the war with drug money. So they become partners with not only the Guadalajara drug cartel at the time, they also become partners with Pablo Escobar. So they're getting money now from Pablo Escobar and the Guadalajara cartel to fund the war. That was one of the ways they were getting money to the Contras. Another way was they also sold, as you know, Iran-Contra, the missiles to Iran, using the Mossad as cover to sell the missiles. And the money they were getting, they were then using to support this illegal war in Nicaragua. Now, getting back to the Veracruz ranch, Sean, the Veracruz ranch was very important to the CIA because that ranch had a very large airstrip. And Caro Quintero was using that airstrip, obviously, to bring in big planeloads of cocaine. So they actually rented the ranch from Caro Quintero to train Contras there. And it was strategically located because they could fly the weapons going to the Contras from Veracruz directly into Ilipango, El Salvador, where they were arming the Contras with those weapons. And it also helped them because any cocaine they were bringing in from Colombia and South America would be flown from South America to Veracruz, where the military planes will refuel and then continue bringing in the cocaine into different parts of the United States. At the time that this was going on, you had generals like Petraeus and Lieutenant Colonel I forget Stevens, or I forget anyway. They were all there training Contras. Okay, this is no secret. Okay, but they were basically selling the drugs to a black violator by the name of Freeway Ricky Ross at Los Angeles. Now, I knew about Ricky Ross because I had worked in Los Angeles. And Ricky Ross basically was being provided the drugs by two Contra generals or Contra officials by the name of Danilo Blandón and Edwin Meneses. Danilo Blandón owned car lots and everything else in the Los Angeles area. Freeway Ricky Ross was then inundating the South Central area with cheap crack cocaine. He was providing the Bloods and the Crips with, like I said, very cheap crack cocaine. They caused the cocaine epidemic of the 80s. So now you have a lot of black people, a lot of Hispanics, and Puerto barrios all getting high on crack cocaine. And it was being kept secret that it was being provided by these two Contra officials to Freeway Ricky Ross. That's the story. Now, let's go back to Kiki. Kiki Camarena in 85 had found out that at Caro Quintero's ranch, tons of cocaine were being brought through that ranch. He found out. He basically let people know in the government that he was opening up an investigation on that. Kiki Camarena, not knowing Sean, he didn't know anything about the Contras. He didn't know they were training people there. He knew nothing about that. He was going to open up an investigation, so therefore he was kidnapped to be interrogated, not to be killed. That's why Kiki Camarena was bandaged. He was blindfolded. They had planned to find out what he knew, and depending on what he knew, they might let him go. So when they picked him up, elements of the DFS picked him up, Directorate of Federal Security, which is Mexico CIA, who works under the aegis of our CIA. Okay? So therefore, they pick Kiki up, they blindfold him, and they interrogated him. And they start asking him questions about what he knew about the CIA, what he knew about the Contras, and Kiki's telling him, it's on tapes. I heard the tapes. I know nothing about that. I know nothing about Mexican government officials being corrupt. But what has been kept secret is that one of the interrogators was Ismael Feliz Rodriguez, a Cuban CIA operative. That's where I crashed, because I wanted to have that guy arrested for Kiki's murder, and they said that no, that I did not have the jurisdiction to investigate the CIA, that I should stay investigating the Mexican cartel leaders.
Oh, wow. Okay. This is late 80s. Ronald Reagan's the president, correct?
Part of the time, but most of the time it was old man Bush.
It was old man Bush.
Yes, because remember, he had been director of the CIA before that.
Exactly.
Then vice president, then president. So he had his hands all over this thing.
Okay, where do I want to pick this thing apart? Let's go to Kiki Camarena's interrogation. You answered a question that I was going to ask. They brought him in, and it was originally supposed to be an interrogation, but it turned out to be a torture and a killing. Why and how did it go so far?
Because they knew that Kiki knew about them bringing in the cocaine at that ranch. They knew because they asked him, and it's right on the tapes, Sean. I heard the tapes. We have transcripts of the tapes. Anybody can view the tapes. They asked Camarena, what do you know about Veracruz Ranch? And Kiki answers, I know that Caro Quintero is bringing in tons of cocaine to that ranch. And they even ask him, how do you know? How did you get this information? Who is your informant? Who's telling you this? And he said, Comandante Lorabacchio has wiretaps on Caro Quintero's phones. He has been listening to communications between the ranch and Caro Quintero, and he's the one that told me that Caro Quintero was bringing in a lot of cocaine through that or to that ranch from South America. That's all I know. And they said, no, you know more. You got to know more. And they kept interrogating him. And one of the interrogators was an expert in interrogation, Ismael Feliz Rodriguez, a CIA operative.